Hey guys, so what I'm going to go over today are the cell notes. They are going to be pretty long, so just bear with me and feel free to pause and come back at any time. And remember, you can always ask questions, so message me on any of the social media stuff or come talk to me during class. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So you've got a little picture of the microscope that needs to be labeled in your journal, and these are the basic parts. We've got our eyepiece at the very top where our eye looks through. We also have what's called the body tube directly underneath that. So this actually right here is called the body tube, which is not labeled on yours, but you can add that. And then underneath that, we have the objective lenses. So the objective lenses are going to be kind of like small, medium, and large. Typically, there's about 3 of them on there, and you can rotate this piece right here and switch between them as you want to see it more and more magnified. You always start on the lowest power objective lens whenever you're focusing, and then you move to the medium, and then finally the large. Underneath that, we have the stage with the stage clips that hold the microscope slide in place. And then at the bottom on the base, we're either going to have a mirror or a light to shine light up through the slide so that we can see it a little bit better. And then we've got the coarse adjustment knobs on the left. And so the coarse adjustment knob is going to make the large changes, like make a really big difference in the focusing. And then once you get it as close to as clear as possible, with that one you can go to the fine adjustment focusing knob and make fine adjustments and get it exactly perfectly crystal clear. In order to determine the total magnification, you multiply the objective lens that you're using times the eyepiece, which is going to be 10. So you have to look at the side of the objective lens, whichever one is pointing down, that's the one that you're using. And so you just look at that number. In this example, it's 4, and then you multiply that times the eyepiece, which is going to be 10, and that's going to give you your total magnification. So basically what you're looking at is 40 times bigger than what it is in real life. So let's start going over the cell theory. This guy here in this picture, his name is Robert Hooke. And Hooke lived from 1635 to 1703, and he's the one that first invented the microscope. And he looked at a piece of cork under his microscope, which you see a picture of down here at the bottom, and he noticed that the cork looked like it had these little rooms or these kind of little spaces in it, and he called those cells. So he's the one that first coined the term cells. And then there were these 3 other guys that are also really important. So Schleiden, kind of all 3 of these guys, Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow, kind of expanded on what Hooke had done, and they took it, a step further. So Schleiden discovered that plants are made of cells. Schwann discovered that animals are made up of cells. So we know that everything that's living is made up of cells. And then Virchow, he's the one that stated that living things come from other living things. And all of these put together are what is the cell theory, which is basically like the laws of cells. This is like the rules of cells. This is the rules of life. So this is going to be down at the bottom. And here it is a little bit bigger for you to copy. So the first principle of cell theory is the cell is the basic unit of life. And the second one is all living things are either going to be unicellular or multicellular. And then the third is cells come from cells. And so remember in science, when we say that something is a theory, that means that there's a lot of evidence to back this up. And we know that this is basic fact. Now, the beautiful thing about science is stuff changes as we learn more things. We change how we explain, why or how stuff happens. But once we pretty much say, hey, it's a theory, we know that this is true. So what it means by the cell is the basic unit of life is it doesn't get any simpler than this. If we're talking about something that's living, the most basic is the cell. It's the basic unit of life. And then all living things are obviously made of cells, and they're either going to be unicellular, that means they're made of 1 cell, or they're multicellular, made of 2 cells or 2 billion cells. And then cells come from cells, that's reproduction. Cells are going to come from other cells, right? So we're going to talk about sexual and asexual reproduction later on, probably next week. So here's a picture of cells. And these are actually cheek cells from the inside of your cheek, which is one way that they can check DNA. If you've ever seen those commercials for 23andMe or Ancestry.com where you can send off your DNA to get it analyzed, this is how they do it. They actually make you spit into these little tubes called epitubes, and they analyze the cheek cells, and that's how they extract your DNA. And so in here you can actually see some of the organelles inside the cell. This cell has actually been stained with a stain called methyl blue to make it look that kind of purplish color, so that you can see it a little bit better. So there are two main types of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. This is the last box on that note. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more. So this is your next page of notes, and we're going to talk about prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Here is a prokaryotic cell. The important thing that you should know about this is that they do not have a nucleus. So the DNA is just all bunched up in the center. And this is the first life that existed on Earth. So I want you to draw a little caveman and write the word predate. So these are the very early types of cells. They still exist. These are actually really important. Bacteria and other things are considered prokaryotic organisms, but they are the earliest life. Now, it doesn't mean that they're less important than eukaryotic cells or anything like that. They all have their role to play. So in prokaryotic cells, the DNA is not organized. In other words, it does not have a nucleus, and it was the first cell to evolve. One example is bacteria cells, and they have no membrane enclosed organelles. Eukaryotic cells are like you. They are they do have DNA inside of a nucleus because they have a nucleus, right? That's where the DNA is at, so it's more organized. And so eukaryotic cells, this is what you are made of. So these are going to be the types of cells that have the DNA in the nucleus, and they're going to be like plant cells and animal cells, which we will be talking about in a little while. DNA is neatly organized in the nucleus for eukaryotic cells, and they do have organelles that are surrounded by membranes. They have a nucleus, and examples would be plants, animals, and fungi. They're both going to have a cell wall, DNA, and cytoplasm. And here's a really easy way to remember the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Pro, no, you do. Pro, no nucleus. Eukaryotic do have a nucleus. So I have here a T-chart, and I've got these little pictures for you, so I want you to sort through them and figure out which ones are prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Keep in mind, right, that prokaryotic are going to have the spaghetti, crazy looking DNA that looks like spaghetti in the middle, just in the cytoplasm, while eukaryotic is going to look, it's going to have a nucleus, so that's going to be obvious that there's a nucleus there and that the DNA is not just scattered. So pause and go ahead and sort through your cards. And here are your answers. Again, prokaryotic has the DNA just kind of thrown into the cytoplasm, while eukaryotic has that nucleus where the DNA is inside. So we're going to glue in page 375 as a review for cell theory, which I just talked about in this video. And then we're also going to glue in the next page, which is 407. So here's page 407, which has a plant and animal cell. Make sure that you only glue the edge of it so that you can still see both sides of the picture. Here is our model of an animal and a plant cell, and we've got these little flaps where we're going to write in our functions. But I want to talk a little bit more about the difference between a plant and an animal cell. So now we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into just eukaryotic cells. So we talked about how prokaryotic don't have a nucleus, but now we're going to focus on eukaryotic that do have a nucleus. And we're going to talk about the difference between plant and animal cells, and we're going to talk about the organelles that they have. Animal cells are going to be more of an organic shape as opposed to a geometric shape. So if you're taking art right now, you've talked about organic and geometric shapes. Animal cells are going to be kind of like blobs, or they're going to look kind of rounded, while plant cells are going to be more geometric. So plant cells are going to have straight edges, and there's a reason for this. Plant cells, or plants, don't have a skeleton like we do. We are made of animal cells, and plant cells, because they don't have a skeleton, they need something that's going to provide structure for them. Our skeleton provides our structure. If we didn't have a skeleton, we would basically be a big blob of muscle crawling around on the floor, and we wouldn't be able to sit up straight or stand up straight or anything, but our skeleton provides that for us. Plants don't have that, so they need something else to provide structure and support for them. If you've ever been into a carrot, right, or any vegetables, you know that it's crunchy. Well, one of the reasons that it's crunchy is because of these cell walls around it. So imagine if you are building a building and I'm giving you bricks that are made of jello. That's basically what cells are like. They have this jelly-like fluid called cytoplasm that fills up the inside of the cell. Well, that would not make for a very strong building or strong wall because they're jelly-like, right? The bricks are made of jello. But if I were to cover those bricks with a hard shell, like an M&M candy coating, it would make for a lot stronger building. And that's basically what plants have. They have this outer shell that's hard and strong that makes it makes it easier to stack them, and that the structure is stronger. Another thing is that geometric shape also makes it really easy to stack them. Imagine, using rectangular or square bricks as opposed to rounded bricks, right? It's going to be easier to stack the square ones with the straight edges and to create that solid structure with those straight edges. And that's one of the reasons, another adaptation that plants have that give them that structure, because they don't have a skeleton. We're going to dive into organelles now. So organelles are a cell's organs. Just like you have a heart and lungs and a stomach that do certain things for you, they have a certain function, they have a certain job in your body. A cell has organelles. So organelles are the organs of a cell. A cell wall is a hard shell outside plant and bacteria cells. So that's going to provide that protection and support for the plant cell. You can see in these plant cells that I have here on the right, they've also got that geometric shape that makes it easier for them to stack. Cell membrane there's going to be a cell membrane around plant cells and animal cells. Animal cells are only going to have a cell membrane. They're not going to have a cell wall like plant cells do. So a cell membrane is not as strong as a cell wall, but it does protect, and it does basically, it's kind of like a gatekeeper. It decides what can come in and what can't come in, or what can go out and what can't go out of the cell. So it's the gatekeeper. The word membrane is just basically kind of like a skin around the cell. It's thin, but hey, it's better than nothing being there. So it's not going to offer as much protection as a cell wall, but it is going to be there to act kind of like a skin. So membrane is just a fancy word for skin. If you've ever peeled a boiled egg, there's a membrane between the shell and the egg. So you might have noticed that it's just a really thin skin that envelops the egg, and that's kind of what all cells have. Cytoplasm is going to be this jelly-like fluid in between everything. So if I told you that we're going to make a giant model of a cell and we're going to use a swimming pool to do it, the cell wall would be like the wall of the swimming pool, and then I would assign you guys to be different organelles. Like some people were going to be the mitochondrion, some people were going to be the nucleus and the chloroplast and everything. And I told you, okay, everybody get in the water, right? Everybody get inside the cell. The water in between you and the swimming pool would be the cytoplasm. That's what everything is sitting in. So it's not going to be as kind of thick like Jello. It's going to be more like jelly that you would put on toast. So you can, move around in it, and there's things that are being transported like proteins and nutrients and stuff between the different organelles in the cell, but it's also going to keep everything from moving around too much. The stuff is not going to be rolling around all over the place. It keeps things in place, but it also allows for the transportation of things. The nucleus is the brain of the cell. This is what controls the cell. This would be like the principal of the school, right? It's the one that's the guy that's in charge. The nucleus is the boss. And this is what contains the DNA, because obviously these both, right, plants and animal cells are eukaryotic organisms, so they're going to have a nucleus with the DNA inside of it. And so remember, DNA is genetic material that you get from your parents. And chloroplasts are going to perform photosynthesis. So they are the ones that are turning sunlight into chemical energy. Obviously, this is only going to happen in plant cells, but because they have chloroplasts, and so they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to do the photosynthesis. So on this picture on the right, you can see the chloroplasts there. Notice also these are plant cells, so they've got that geometric shape. A vacuole is going to be for storage. It's kind of like a water balloon. And so this is where the plant keeps all of its food, waste, and water. Some animal cells will also have vacuoles, but they don't need it like plants do, right? Plants cannot get up and go get water or nutrients or anything. If there's a drought, they're stuck wherever they're at. So when it does rain, they are going to keep as much nutrients and water as they can and use it whenever there's a drought. And if you ever killed a plant by forgetting to water it, what ends up happening is it gets all wilty, right? Well, that's because it's kind of like there's a leak in your water balloon. It starts to deflate, and so that's kind of what happens to the vacuole. As the water's being used up that it had stored previously, the vacuole starts to get smaller and smaller, and then the whole cells kind of collapse, and that's why your plants get wilty. And our last organelle is mitochondrion. So this is a really important organelle. They always like to ask questions about this one. And this is where the energy is produced for the cell. So let's look at the difference between plant and animal cells. On the left, you have plant cells. And on the right, you've got animal cells. So the plant cell is going to have a cell wall, the animal cell is not. The plant cell is going to have a vacuole, and it's probably going to be a pretty large vacuole, or maybe even a couple of large vacuoles. If an animal cell happens to have vacuoles, it's going to be a small one, or small ones. Plants are going to have chloroplasts, animal cells won't. Plants are going to be boxy or square shaped, that geometric shape, and animal cells are going to have all kinds of shapes. And then finally, they both have a cell membrane. They're both going to have a nucleus, obviously, because they're eukaryotic. They're both going to have cytoplasm, and they're both going to have mitochondria. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for visiting Somo's YouTube channel. Look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. And don't forget to like and subscribe.